is the practice of Reiki somehow dangerous, or is it something we should be afraid of? Is it something that we should shy away from? In this video, I want to address these topics because it's something that does come up, and it comes up actually a lot in the West. If you look at my recent video here on the channel about Reiki and Christianity, I was kind of alluding into some of these topics, and I want to dive a little bit further into that here in this video because I think actually it is worth exploring. And I think there's an aspect to Reiki that actually can be dangerous. And I'm not saying that it's clickbait. I'm not saying that to, entice fears or to elicit, kind of negative thoughts about the practice. That's not what I mean at all. Reiki in and of itself is a very, very beautiful practice. It's a practice of being still in the mind and the body. It's a practice of turning into the self. It's a practice of letting go. It's a practice of healing. So what is it then that could potentially make Reiki dangerous, right? Well, this is a question that I think is best thought about from a personal perspective. As we go through our own healing journey, and Reiki is a beautiful way to do that, we, by definition and by the very nature of healing, will experience our own friction. We will experience our own resistance to the movement of energy or our own healing, right? This is how we heal. We heal by going through the fire, by going through the pain, right? I love this quote by Charles Burkowski where he talks about a very famous poet where he talks about it only matters how well you walked through the fire, right? And that fire is where things can get a little bit precarious or a little bit dangerous when we're talking about Reiki, because as we release, as we heal, as we go into the self, our darkness starts to come out. Our attached beliefs, our theories on our suffering, or our beliefs on our own suffering, they start to come out. They start to be released. I'm of the opinion, and I would challenge anybody to, and I'd welcome actually, challenge is not the right way to put that. I would welcome anybody to refute this. I'm of the opinion that there cannot possibly be such a thing as hell. There can't possibly be demons. There can't be darkness. There can't be dark forces. There can't be any of those things. And I'm not trying to say, before the comments on the video light up, I'm not saying that they don't exist. That's not what I mean. What I mean is these darknesses, the demons, the dark forces, the dark energy of the planet, whatever it might be, those are all manifestations of personal suffering, right? So when we look at the idea of Christianity, like in the video here on the channel, again, about Christianity and Reiki, I'm trying to go at length about the discussion of how the kingdom of heaven lies within and how Daikomyo, the energy of the universe of which we all are, is natural and pure in its state. Now, if you come into this embodiment and you have a very difficult life, we all have difficulties. Some, unfortunately, have a much more difficult route than others. And based off of how difficult these things may be or how we attach to our difficulties, I think that's probably more important. Our story will fester and it will suffer inside of us, right? And we will project that suffering onto other people. We will convey that suffering to the external world, right? So we might do that in all of the 7 deadly sins. We might do that in, harm to ourselves, whatever it might be. And we might present as dark. We might present as somebody who is really struggling on their journey, right? This is the demon. This is the hell that we are holding on to. And we all have an aspect of that in us. And what I'm trying to say in this video is I'm not saying that our suffering isn't real, because obviously our suffering is very real. What's not real is an external hell or external demons or external suffering in this regard, because simply it's a reflection of our own internal state. So when we think about this idea of Reiki being, dangerous or evil, or I hear this all the time, like, again, it goes back to the Christianity and Reiki video. People can't practice Reiki because it's going to somehow channel the devil. It's going to bring forward demons or whatever. Now, I can only speak about this from my perspective, mind you, right? And so that's kind of a caveat here. And I'm not saying that as a catch-all. My perspective is the only perspective that exists in my frame of reference, right? That doesn't discredit somebody else's experience or their perspective. I'm simply speaking from my perspective on this video. And because of that perspective, these are kind of the axioms that I bring forward in the topic of this idea of, is Reiki somehow dangerous? If we think about this idea of our own internal suffering and our internal space, as I heal and I release, then I will experience that friction, right? Now, there are some things that are really dark. There's abuse, there's really serious traumas that are going to be buried very, very deep, and they are going to be very entrenched in the nature and the fabric of our being. As we heal those things, we are not going to heal them if they were to manifest. Imagine how oxymoronic this would be. If that trauma would present itself to us on our healing journey as something really desirable, something really agreeable, like a super peaceful walk through, a tranquil field in the mountains, for instance, like that's how you would relive that trauma, well, then we would never let go of it. Right? We would never want to free ourselves from that. But instead, these kind of torturous attachments to our past are always presented in darkness, in demons, in pain and suffering and so on, because that's what we're trying to let go of. If it didn't look like that, then we would hold on to it, I think, anyways. And so as we try to let go of these things, then we are faced with a choice, right? We're faced with an idea of like, why would I want to hold on to this thing? Why would I want to hold on to this thing that is presenting itself as painful, as suffering, as dark, as evil, as demonic, as whatever it may be, right? This, I think, is the crux, or the kind of main point in this video, is if we are letting go of these things, then this is where we experience this evil, right? It's where we experience the idea that Reiki can somehow be evil. If we think about this from a Western perspective, for instance, the idea of heaven and hell is very dualistic. The idea of a benevolent God that demands that you worship it, otherwise you go to eternal damnation, it is too dualistic and it's narcissistic in many ways, right? So that can't possibly be the discussion. It can't possibly be, in reality, what's at play here. I think that what we have is a situation where we're trying to turn in to the Christ, or the energy, the Daikomyo, the Reiki energy within all of us, right? And as we do that, we have to shed all the layers of our resistance, our kind of Dante's Inferno, as it were, right? The many layers that there are to our own internal hell, whatever that may be. And in every religion, hell is talked about like that, in layers that as you go inside the self, we start to experience more of that. So in this regard, I think that there can be an aspect, it's too extreme to say that Reiki is dangerous or evil, but what comes out of the self has to present itself as evil or dangerous or scary or dark or demonic or whatever it might be, because otherwise we would hold on to that, right? We don't want to hold on to anything inside the self. We don't want to hold on to any of our attachments, our stories, our suffering, because from all attachment lies all of our suffering. It's full stop. That's the way it works, right? So, as we go into that space and we let go more of the self, we let go of more of our attachments. And those attachments are literally the root of our darkness that we're holding on to. And that darkness is different for everybody's story and so on. So what is it then that is, I think, precarious about the practice of Reiki is when we start to view Reiki as something that is not a personal and internal journey only and full stop. When we start to view Reiki as something that we can do to other people, that we can download, that we can upgrade, that we can put onto other people and whatever, because all of those things end up being a delusion. They end up being a delusion of the practice. The practice is about turning into the self. The practice is about turning into the self and letting go of our attachments. So we can't do that if we remain attached to the practice. We can't do that if we are constantly seeking out direction and belief and everything else from the external world. We have to find it on the internal nature of the self, right? So even here, even in this space, this is where things can get a little bit precarious. And I'm going to talk about this in an upcoming video as well. via the nature of this external practice of Reiki and our belief of the practice of Reiki. But in this case, I want to really frame this idea of the evilness or the darkness or the dangers of Reiki as being purely non-existent. They simply can't exist because what you're doing is you're trying to let go of the things that you believe are dark or dangerous or evil in the first place, and we want to let go of those. We don't want to hold on to those things anymore. Look at this. We don't want to hold on to the belief of the self. We don't want to hold on to the belief of our suffering. Just like in a nightmare, for instance, when we have nightmares, it's all of that energy leaving the body. We're healing as we experience that, right? And once we heal and once it's gone, it's gone. We don't have to come back to it. We don't need to stay remembered or stay attached or stay in the cycle of the continuation of that same story because it simply doesn't exist, right? The only way to let go of that story is to turn in. The only way to find that peace is to go in. The only way to find that stillness is to go in. The only way to find the light of Christ or our Buddha nature or the fact that we are already enlightened beings is to go in to let go, right? We have to do this. So what is it? What is this idea of the practice of Reiki being evil? How can that possibly be the case? Well, and where does that lie? It lies in a busy mind. It lies in a mind that is full of story. That might be a cultural, contextual story. It might be a familial story. It might be your own story. It is story nonetheless, right? If we think about from a healing perspective what Reiki does, this is very similar to our practice of healing or our activity of healing every night when we sleep. And why am I bringing that up? Because we all know this. Everybody knows this. Every night that we go to sleep, our body has the ability to heal. And why is that the case? It's the case because we get out of the way of our story, right? And this is where we have our nightmares, right? It's where our fears leave the body. It's where I used to have panic attacks. We get panic attacks at night because everything that I was holding on to all day long, all of the anxiety and the worry and the fear or whatever it might be, would finally have an opportunity to escape my body because I finally let go of the story because I'm asleep, right? Now, when I'm asleep, everything leaves. So we're trying to replicate that aspect of healing, that aspect of our existence in our waking life. In this life, this life where I'm consciously awake and not asleep. That's a big difference, right? And I get it. I get why people might want to say that it's evil or that it's dark or that you can summon demons and all of that. Because there's a thread of truth to that. You very well may see these things. You very well may experience these things as you heal and as you move on your journey. Here's the thing that I think is really precarious about that statement, is notice that it's always coming from somebody else. And it's coming from somebody else who I 100% guarantee has a story that they want you to believe. Their church, their religion, their form of Reiki, their power symbols, their whatever it may be. So they're taking your power away. Right? And we can't heal unless we fall fully into ourself and we turn into the self to allow those entrapments of the self to unwind, right? So think about that again, like who is making the statement that Reiki is evil or that it channels demons or whatever it may be? And why are they making that statement? Two very important questions to ask. And I bet the why is always because they're trying to convince you to believe their line of thought, right? You can call Reiki whatever you want to call it. Reiki is a journey of going into the self in stillness. That's it, right? So that can be prayer for you. It can be fasting. It can be meditation, yoga, mindfulness. It can be Reiki. It can be Buddhism. It can be any line of religion. It can be anything that gets you into a flow state. You don't have to call it Reiki. It's whatever works for you to bring you into the self. That's the point, right? And as you go into the self, that's where the therapy lies. That's where our ability to heal lies. And we don't have to be afraid of that. Our ability to heal, our ability to release is predicated by the intellect of our mental, physical, and emotional bodies, right? We will never experience, as we turn into the self, we will never experience more than we can't possibly handle. That's simply not how it works. If that was the case, people would be breaking down left, right, and center all the time, right? And I know an immediate follow-up to that or an immediate rebuttal to that comment is going to be like this. Well, there's schizophrenics, there's people who have mental disorders, there's people who are really, really suffering. Yes, that's true. That's the case. From one societal component or context, that's the case. If you look at other societies, people who are in that mental space are treated very differently. Many societies view people in this state as healers, as people who can bridge the space between this reality and an external reality or a spiritual reality. They can go beyond the veil. And there's not the same issue, right? And so before that rebuttal comes up of like, well, people have mental illness all the time, I'm not discrediting that. What I'm saying is, look at how we treat people in this space, right? People are going through their own suffering. They're going through their own trauma. Definitely there's PTSD. There's all these types of things, right? Absolutely. Instead of shunning, instead of pushing people aside, instead of shooting them away, we can be kind and caring and compassionate and not speak to them, not offer solutions, just simply be in that space. So these are just my thoughts, on this practice. Obviously, I love Reiki. It is something that has saved me, and it's allowed me to go into myself. It's allowed me to do a lot of healing work, and it's something that I hold very dear. And, I'm making this video because maybe it'll encourage you to go a little bit further into yourself. Maybe it will encourage you to face that darkness that's inside so that we can all reach our liberation, right? That's what we're here for. We're here to recognize our enlightened selves, not to put that on somebody else, not to find that in somebody else, to find that in some religion or to find it in some external thing, but to find it in your heart, right? To find it in your soul, in your being. Find your true self through your practice. That's what we're here for. And that's Daikomyo, right? Or that's the love of the universe. That's Christ. That's Buddha. That's Satori. That's enlightenment. That's simply the energy of the universe. Whatever works for you. But that simple thing can't be evil. It can't be wrong. It can't be dark. It can't be demonic. Those things are all simply constructs of our own egotistical mind and our suffering. So if we let go of the constructs, then what are we left with? If we let go of all societal constructs, what are we left with? We're left with the self, right? So turn into that and find your own kingdom of heaven within. I hope that helps everybody. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for your support of the channel. And let me know in your comments below how you found it. I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much, as always, to everybody. Be well, and in Gosho to all.